focus in on the island of Kauai and catch up with Kauai County Mayor Derek Kawakami.
Plus, October is Domestic Violence Awareness Month. We'll be talking to experts about what they're seeing about domestic violence post-pandemic. Spotlight Now starts now.
You're watching Spotlight Now with Ryan Kalei-Suji and Yunji Denise on Hawaii News Now. Have questions or comments for our guests? Join the conversation in our Facebook live stream. Spotlight Now, where Hawaii comes to talk.
Hello and thanks for tuning in here on this Tuesday to Spotlight Now as we begin our conversation with, of course, Kauai County Mayor, who we'll be getting to in just a few moments. We want to encourage all of you to engage in the conversation. You can, of course, enter your questions into the comment section on Facebook. We always try to integrate any questions that you may have for our guests, or you can also get involved by clicking the QR code that you see in the bottom of your screen. We'll be monitoring the questions throughout the show and ask any that questions or topics that may come up.
Yeah, and we want to welcome in our guest now, Kauai County Mayor Derek Kawakami. Mr. Mayor, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
It's lovely to see you. I think this is the first time we've had you in studio since we moved over to this platform, and we're so happy to see you.
It is the first time, and I'm very happy to be here, so thank you.
I want to dive right in. We know we have limited time with you, and start with an issue that is plaguing all of the counties. That is this issue of hazard pay with COVID. This is an issue that a lot of county workers in all of the counties have been upset about. The unions are saying that they want that hazard pay. You've now reached an agreement. How did you reach that agreement, and how are you feeling about it?
Well, it's a contractual obligation. I mean, it's in the contract with our associates and workers. To tell you the truth, it was hard for me because I feel like as a community, the people of Kauai and Niihau did so much collectively to make sure that we mitigated the hazard. I mean, we were one of the safest places, I think, on the face of the planet. We had people moving from other places because they felt relatively safe on Kauai. So I was feeling torn about it because, one, I felt that we had done everything to keep our workers safe. We didn't have any outbreaks in the workplace, but part of the negotiation is to go through a process, and so we went through arbitration. The arbitrator ruled that it doesn't matter what you guys think, we're going to rule that there was a hazard. So there's no debating that issue. And then it became an issue of, well, what is a fair amount to pay? And so it was just ongoing discussion. I know that a lot of the unions took a look at what Maui had settled on early on at 25%. And quite frankly, we wouldn't be able to pay 25%. So we're able to work with the unions to find a middle ground, which would be around 15%. And I feel comfortable paying that amount. I know that a lot of the people in the private sector that had to face unemployment, that had to, go without getting paid, without work, may feel a little stung, and I totally get it. I totally feel where they are coming from. But again, this is a contractual obligation. We did everything in our part to make sure that we were able to strike the right balance.
And when trying to make that decision, this is obviously something that you did not budget for, during this pandemic and trying to go through this crisis. How did this settlement ultimately impact the budget when you're formulating, your operating expenses and budgets for the county as a whole? Were there other things that had to be adjusted overall to make way for this?
So there were a few options to pay this bill. We felt comfortable paying for this bill through the general fund. So it has to go in front of council. There's going to be a public hearing. And we felt that was the right way to go because the people should have an understanding of how we got to this place where we're paying our workers this hazard pay. So it really is going to impact our budget in the sense that we have done a great job creating what you could call like an emergency reserve. So we do have funds set aside for unanticipated expenses such as hazard pay or disasters. And so the money is going to come from that emergency reserve, so through the general fund. And that's going to be an open, transparent process where people will be able to get their input in, hear the discussion as to how we got to this place.
It must feel good, though, to move on from this because this has been so contentious.
It's, in a way it's been contentious, but on Kauai, I take great pride as far as trying to be out there in the field with our people. And so we've been able to build great rapport with the workers out there, whether I'm out there with the roads crew, helping to resurface roads and fill potholes, whether we're down at the DMV trying to, help out with motor vehicle registration. So as far as communication, it didn't feel contentious with our actual associates and the union members. But like anything else, I think when there's a disagreement, it's always going to feel like there's friction. But I think we're all in it for the same thing, which is to get Kauai to a better place, get past this issue, and try to strike a balance of what we could all agree upon. And it looks like we're agreeing upon this.
Well, and speaking about the workers that are going to get this compensation, just want to ask you about just the overall labor workforce through the county. We've spoken to other mayors, including Mayor Rick Blangiardi, who continues to struggle to fill positions, having to compete against the private sector. How are you faring on the island of Kauai with some of these vacancies in county positions and filling them with workers that not only want the job, but are well equipped for them?
Oh, it's been a big challenge. I mean, all around, I think our vacancy rate is about almost 17%. And it has, continued to grow. And the areas that we're seeing like critical needs are, of course, our dispatchers. Could you imagine a world where you call 911 and nobody is picking up? And when we go to the dispatch room to see the work that they do, it is so complicated. I mean, to be able to multitask, remain calm, cool, and collected, and connect officers with the victims or the people that need help. In our opinion, dispatchers are public safety officers. They are the first responders. So we have to figure out a way to compensate them fairly so that we can actually attract people. When you take a look at our DMV, all of our front of the house operations are severely understaffed right now. Our bus drivers, we had to postpone Sunday bus transportation because we can't find enough bus drivers. So that's why we take a look at things like picking up medical premiums. We take a look at creating flexible work schedules. Right now we're investing to create an early childhood education center because one, we have to compete and we have to be looked upon as an employer that cares and able to recruit and retain the very best.
I want to key in on two things that you said there. One was the medical care, and I know that you started offering free medical insurance for county workers. The other thing is the child care piece, and I've heard you speak on this before, the idea of child care being infrastructure. Tell us a little bit about that thinking and also the medical insurance and why you decided to offer that.
Sure, I think the medical insurance is long overdue. We had the Prepaid Health Act of Hawaii in the mid-'70s. It covered every single worker under the sun except government workers. And back in those days, government workers had health insurance picked up in some way, shape, or form. And over the years, that has changed where a clerk might be contributing almost a quarter of their paycheck for healthcare premiums. So when we took a look at the cost, which is about $3.1 million, which is about less than 1% of our entire budget, we said, this is a good faith effort to, one, make sure that we put our action where our words are and really say that our health is a prerequisite for productivity. So that was something we do. But the bigger conversation is how can we educate people for preventative health care to take care of your body and your health before you get sick. As far as the early childhood education center, we view it as infrastructure. I mean, in that 0 to 4-year-old age gap, that is the most critical developmental years for any person growing up. In Hawaii and most places across the nation, we invest heavily from K through 12, but we've neglected the most critical years where you get the biggest return on investment. And when I say that they are infrastructure, literally, those first 4 years, it's the foundation. If we build a strong foundation, it'll be able to hold up the weight of the world against his or her shoulders. So we really are investing on creating an environment where young people can thrive and then be productive into their adult years.
And what does that practically look like? Is that working with the state office and the lieutenant governor's office, or is that something that's a standalone for the county workers on Kauai?
No, absolutely. I mean, I got to give big thanks to Lieutenant Governor Sylvia Luke and all of the partners. And I tell you, not only state departments, but the nonprofits out there, we're working with all of them. We build facilities, we can build it out, but we're going to have to lean on them heavily for workforce development to make sure that we have qualified, highly qualified preschool teachers and everything in between to make sure that we have the staffing available. So we're working across the board. We've worked with the Chamber of Commerce. When we talk to employers like, hey, what is the biggest barrier for people to coming back to work? A lot of it is, well, there's no childcare. So, these young moms who want to work are struggling to find work because, one, it's almost cheaper to stay home and raise their child because the cost of early childhood education is so expensive.
So the other piece of that, of course, is housing, right?
Yeah,
that we talk to
absolutely.
anybody in the, whether it's private or public workforce, that all roads lead to housing. There is a new law that gives counties authorities to regulate and even phase out short-term rentals. What is your thought about doing this, and how are you going to exercise this power, and how could that impact housing on Kauai?
Well, the genesis of that law and that bill is it came from Kauai County. The planning department actually drafted that bill. But quite frankly, we really do not need to utilize that law because we've been able to work out a great working relationship with Airbnb, Expedia, VRBO, all of the third-party platforms. We basically told them, look, we already have a policy in place. These are all of the properties outside of the VDA that have a non-compliance use certificate. So please utilize our list before you let people sort of advertise on your platforms. And we really, literally, I told them, think about it this way. When you come to Hawaii and you come to somebody's house, you take your shoes off. You don't want to be the one tracking mud and dirt in somebody's home. All we're asking you to do, we're not asking to shut you down. We're just asking that you kindly remove your shoes and treat our island with the respect that it deserves. And when we put it that way, no problem. And since then, we've had 6 years of this great partnership where these companies work with our planning department works with them. Our enforcement officers are out there combing the internet to see any of these one-offs starting to, advertise illegal properties. So we don't see for our island a need to utilize that law because we've already got a great working relationship going on.
Well, it's almost tied to that was something else that started on Kauai, really became a model, and what we're hearing a lot of as we continue to talk about tourism and sustainability, as well as just the overall relationship that visitors have with locals. And that is sort of a reservation system that you have set up at Haena, a popular attraction for many visitors that now people have to pay to be a part of. It's being modeled and being pitched at other potential locations throughout the state. What can you tell us about that and the integration that the county worked with the state to set that up, and some of the results that you've seen ever since implementing it?
I gotta recuse myself and just say, the accolades deserve to be with not only the state of Hawaii, but the community out there on the North Shore. I mean, you want to talk about a community-led, government-supported initiative. This is one to talk about. I mean, during the floods of 2018, a firefighter by the name of Elijah Frank, who lives out in that area, came up and said, hey, everybody's focused on rebuilding, but how can we rebuild during this emergency better than what we found it in? And he pointed out that, hey, we've had a community plan for Ke'e and Haena. Why don't we take this time to get all the stakeholders together so that we can rebuild in a way that we've always wanted to but never had the opportunity? And I tell you, with Senate President Kochi, Rep. Nakamura, and the community, they were able to quickly pivot, get those improvements done, and it's really being led by the community group. Hanalei Initiative has a shuttle system. There's a certain amount of parking stalls, so they've addressed carrying capacity and inventory of a place. If you want to go and see it, you got to jump on a shuttle. People like me would never go to Ke'e. Never, because it was always contentious, because it's impossible to turn around. Tourists are honking at you, and you know how that goes. So they've really done a fantastic job, and I'm really seeing that model being applied statewide and even in county facilities as well.
Do you think that that is a better model than this blanket approach that the governor wants to take, which is the green fee? We know that we are expecting that he's going to try that for a third time to do sort of a tourist tax, if you will. There are others in the tourism industry, Mufi Hanneman among them, who have said, do it destination specific. What do you think is a better way to go, or do you like both?
I think both of them are correct. I think what we have done poorly is recognize our worth. Recognize what Hawaii is worth. Like, we let tourists come, land, get up to all of our special places that are the crown jewels of Hawaii, whether it's Koke'e, Waimea, Waimea Lookout, whether it's Ke'e. Historically, we've just let people run around and get to these destinations for free. Versus when we go to the mainland, everywhere we want to go, whether it's Yosemite or some national park or even a state park, we're paying and we're willing to pay. So I think destination specific, having somebody up there to make sure that people are paying their fair share. And if you're a Hawaii resident, you show them your driver's license, no problem, you get in. I think that would be the best balance. But, I think they're all in agreement that something needs to be done to get visitors to help pay to see these places so that we can maintain these areas appropriately.
Well, you've been in this role now for 6 years. You've had one term, a 4-year. You're in the middle of your second term, and there have been a lot of question marks, a lot of talk about your political future. What can you tell us about what your future looks like once you're termed out of here as Kauai County Mayor?
Well, from where I was when I first started in 2008, where I was sort of running based on feeling that government didn't care about small businesses because I came from, grocery retail, to where I am today. I love what I do. I wish that the office of the mayor and me being mayor didn't have term limits, but that's not a reality. I have a deep yearning to continue to serve. I'm still trying to figure it out with my wife. My daughter's a junior at UNLV. But, I got 2 years left, and I tell you, the 6 years that I've had went by so quickly that I want to make sure that our team finishes strong. I want to make sure that I embrace every moment, because I'm gonna be sad when the day comes that I got to leave office. I've created a lot of memories with my team. It's something that has become a part of me, but I do know that I have to move on, and I still have a deep yearning to serve in an elected capacity. And I'm still talking with my wife on what that looks like. But it's going to be a tough day. I really love what I do.
A lot of folks have speculated as to where that will be, what the next public service what opportunity will look like. You had a fundraiser that was written up at the Pacific Club, and a lot of folks are expecting that you will run for Senator Kochi's seat. That is, of course, if he wants to yield that space as well. So is that a direction that you're heading?
Maybe. I'm not one to eliminate options because, like I said, as I get closer to the end, I think the picture of where I'm going to be will become a little more clear. But Senator Kochi and myself have a great relationship. I mean, I grew up like 3 houses down. His kids used to come and visit our Dalmatian, Pepper. I still look up to him as a mentor. We've had conversations about what's next, and I just want to make sure that I'm ready. So, perhaps God willing, if that's the path that it's going to be, that could be a possibility in the future.
I just want to get your thoughts on what's coming from the island of Kauai, because when you look at the political landscape here in Hawaii, you have Ron Koji, who is Senate President. A lot of talks and eyes look to see that Representative Nakamura could potentially be the first female Speaker of the House, taking over for Speaker Saiki's role if she's able to ascend into that position. People have said you should run for governor. I mean, talk about just the power that's coming from the island of Kauai. What do you think has allowed so many prominent politicians from that island to have key roles in regulating the state?
Well, I think if people look upon me favorably, I'm just a reflection of my parents who raised me, and I'm really a reflection of the community that I've been a part of. And, I think perhaps people are recognizing that coming from a smaller community, there's a sense of of genuine authenticity. Because we're such a small place, all we have is our name and our integrity. And so when we say we're going to do something, you can't get away from the fact that we're a small island and that we have to do our best to make sure that we're living up to our word. And I think there's a no-nonsense straightforwardness to, I think, how we make decisions. I really think that maybe perhaps Kauai is on the map. But really, we are just a reflection of people that we've grown up with. I mean, from the uncles down at the beaches that not regulate, but they educate people about surf etiquette and courtesy, from the teachers that taught us in the classroom. Shout out to Lane Tokita. He made a huge impact on my life. He believed in me when I think maybe perhaps a lot of people didn't believe in me. I think it all stems just from where we're from and sort of like what's expected from us. It's all about respect and doing what we say we're going to do.
We have just a few minutes left. I want to do a few rapid fire questions. We like to do these from time to time. The last time we saw you, I think on camera, you had surgery because you were getting in the water a lot. How often are you surfing these days?
I try to do it as much as I can. I mean, I try to do it like a regular routine. So I'd say 4 days out of the week minimum. And my wife lets me do what I love, and so I'm thankful for that. But as much as I can, whether the waves are good or bad, me being in the ocean does a few things. One, it reminds me how small I am, but two, it's extremely humbling. It's extremely humbling, and to me, it keeps me grounded and even keeled.
What's a hidden talent that people might be surprised to know that you can do?
Oh.
Nothing hidden, huh?
No, yeah, anything I can do. Look, I think my hidden talent is I just go all out. You know, my mom would say, look, son, you cannot sing, but if you're going to sing, just go like 150%, like be either really, really bad or really, really good, but go all out. And I don't have any talent that I'm really good at. Whatever I'm going to do, I'm just going to not have shame and just go.
What is your nighttime routine, and what time do you go to bed and get up?
Oh man, my nighttime routine is horrible, but I watch YouTube and I watch like America's Got Talent. I watch like things that like make me cry, like inspirational, that person that wins America's Got Talent that has like a disability or anything inspirational. I wake up at like 4:30. I got 2 dogs. So I don't get 8 hours of sleep, but I feel good. I feel like it works out for me.
Okay.
And any show that you are currently binge watching right now?
All horror movies.
What?
I mean, we're huge horror movie fans. So, I mean, God, that's so morbid, but not any TV shows, but just like I love Shudder. It's like a channel dedicated to scary stories, and this is Halloween. But just anytime, like, we're horror movie fans.
I did not expect that. Let's wrap it up. But before we let you go, what are you going to be for Halloween?
Oh, it depends. So I'm either going to be like a sailor, like a nautical sailor. I was thinking about being a pickleball player because I got a tennis outfit that I've had from a couple years ago. Last year, I was one of the Furies from the show, the movie Warriors. That's from like the late 70s, the baseball player. So I think I got what I need to be like a sailor with, the full striped shirt. And I also have the necessary things to be either like a pickleball player, but I mean, just in my wardrobe, I can post something together.
Going 100%.
Yeah, we're just going to have to wait and find out what the mayor's dressed up as.
Well, thank you so much for being here. Before we let you go,
you.
final thought to our audience today.
Just thank you for tuning in. To anybody watching, I always say I feel like I'm the luckiest mayor in the world. I come from a beautiful place with beautiful people. And I have so much to be grateful for, and thank you for having me.
Oh, please come back soon. We love
thank
seeing you. Mahalo. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
What is Hawaii's soul?
It's the way we exist with all living things. The aina, the ocean, the sky, the kanaka, who originated from the islands.
And everyone who calls Hawaii home.
It's all of us living with island consciousness.
It's understanding that the past is in front of us so that everyone can follow the kupuna
that came before us.
It's our shared kuleana to take care of these islands.
And each other, because we belong to Hawaii.
We are Ko Hawaii.
Spotlight Now with Yunji Denise and Ryan Kalei Suji. Connecting you with newsmakers from throughout our islands. going in depth with Hawaii's leaders and taking your questions live. Spotlight Now, where Hawaii comes to talk.
Well, we want to thank Mayor Derek Kawakami for joining us. We're going to be switching gears. And again, before we do that, we also want to, of course, again, remind you that you can participate in the conversation by scanning this QR code or entering your questions for our guests in the comment section on Facebook.
Yeah, switching gears now, talking about domestic violence awareness in our community. October is, of course, Domestic Violence Awareness Month. So we're going to be talking with 3 experts in the field, starting first off with Angelina Mercado, who is the Executive Director of the Hawaii State Coalition Against Domestic Violence. Angelina, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
We wanted to have you here because we know that one of the things you do is work on tracking the status of domestic violence in our community. Let's start with the basics first, though. When we talk about domestic violence, how is that defined?
There are actually 2 ways that we talk about domestic violence in our community. So we know that there's domestic violence or domestic abuse that occurs within families and the folks who are related by blood. So it could be parent to cousins and folks and children and siblings amongst each other. But a lot of what we also focus on is what's considered intimate partner violence. And so that's when you have an intimate relationship with someone. And that does not have to be a long-standing relationship, does not mean that you have to be married. It could also be somebody with whom you've had a brief dating relationship.
Tell us a little bit about this Scars on the Heart report that was conducted and what was found in the community. What were some of the things that stood out to you through this report?
The Scars on the Heart is actually a quote from one of the survivors that we interviewed as part of the report in a listening session. And she really talked about domestic violence as a scar on the heart. So I want to just acknowledge that where the title comes from. And really what we started to realize when we got the data from this report is that we start to answer the fundamental question of why people don't just leave their abusive situations. And so what was really interesting finding from the report is that about 18% of those who were surveyed in this study have been victims of physical violence in the last 5 years. And then what we haven't gotten the data before was coercive control. And what that looks like is when they're being threatened, where there is isolation. So it may not be physical, but there are other factors that lead to isolation and intimate partner violence. And then we also asked a question, which is incomplete, but we did start to take a look at what impact has COVID had on our community and survivors. And we found that 28% of them have actually found that their situation worsened during COVID.
Wow. And when you talk about it worsening, you mean their financial situation or their ability to leave that relationship, or that the abuse itself has gotten worse?
All of it, because they have, part of it is definitely going to be some of the physical abuse, but then part of the isolation sort of tactics that we had as an overall community because of COVID definitely had an impact on survivors. I mean, we even found during the beginning of the pandemic that we had to put a message out there that, yes, if you are trying to seek emergency domestic violence shelter, you can leave your home to do so.
And now you've been in this role for about 5 years now, I believe. And so you came on right before the pandemic started, having navigated through that and seeing where we're at now. In your perspective and working with this organization for some time now, what have you just seen in the community? By your perspective, have things gotten better, or what are some of the challenges that continue to exist over the last few years that you've been in this job?
We're definitely seeing more reporting. We are hearing from survivors directly or from our member programs. You'll hear about from them later in a couple of minutes, Amanda and Sonoy. We're hearing from the programs that there's a lot of tension in the community. We're seeing that the violence is, I guess, more violent. So we're seeing that there are extremities in physical violence, and presence of guns and firearms and other weapons is definitely increasing.
And how prevalent is domestic violence in our community? What are the numbers like?
So not in our report, but DOH, Department of Health report, has found that in the lifespan of folks in our community statewide, that about 13% of our community statewide in Hawaii have experienced intimate partner violence. And when you break that down by county, 17.8% approximately, 14 approximately percent for Hawaii County, around 11 for Kauai County, and ironically, City and County of Honolulu, with the biggest population, has about 10 or 11% of prevalence in our community.
Is there any way to, when you're tracking and looking at some of the data that you're getting, that you're seeing this happen maybe in a certain location, part of the island, any sort of circumstances? Because it's often difficult to predict, obviously, and we never know the situations that individuals might find themselves in. But I'm just wondering, through the data and through the report, if there is any clear indicators that might help people to, or help to reach out to those people, to advertise that service is available and there is assistance out there.
Definitely in our study, we found that the respondents in West Oahu had the highest prevalence of intimate partner violence. And in that community, those who responded, Filipino and Native Hawaiians. And so, I think that there is, we don't want to perpetuate the stereotype that under-resourced communities and under-resourced folks are going to be especially vulnerable to domestic violence, because we all are, all walks of life. But what it does tell us, and what we should really think about, is that what are the options for people who are seeking safety. And so when you are constrained by economics, geography, west side of Oahu, from a traffic perspective, it's really hard to get to other places. When you factor all of those things in, we talked about just earlier with Mayor Kawakami about childcare, access to childcare, access to affordable childcare. All those factors will determine how you seek, when you seek safety.
COVID obviously is finished, and so we don't have the lockdowns that we were talking about to start, but we still have a lot of financial uncertainty in our community.
Absolutely.
What role does that play in all of this?
Oh, I think that, even if the immediate concern about COVID has passed, I think that we definitely have a concern about the implications of COVID in our community. We are still seeing cases of COVID throughout the state. We saw it over the summer, and we're in the inquiry about what the health implications are for survivors. But from an economic perspective, when you think of the impact of inflation on our community, when you think about even what it looks like from a job force and workforce, for the programs who are trying to provide services, but also for survivors who are trying to seek, jobs, I think it definitely has a detrimental impact, and it's something that we as a community need to figure out.
What do you think is the biggest stigma or misconception about this abuse, this issue as a whole of domestic violence abuse? Is it that it's, pertain to a certain group of people or a certain area? Because I think oftentimes we automatically categorize domestic violence in a certain way, and those individuals who maybe do not fall in that category may feel less inclined to even speak out or seek help because they may feel like a minority. What are some of those, misconceptions about this issue as a whole?
Sure. Definitely the biggest misconception is that it only happens to female identifying people. We know that that is definitely the majority of those who are reporting intimate partner violence, and yet we know that 40% nationally, and even in our report, 33% of the respondents were men. And we also, don't think about the shaming factor or the perception of shame and the impact of the various communities that we have here and what that looks like. And I want to just say that so much of that is grounded and rooted in patriarchy and those ideologies about who can report domestic violence, how, and what is that perception of you if you do.
We're going to be talking a lot about resources with our next two guests, as you referenced, but what would you say to someone who's watching right now who may find themselves in that circumstance and feel very powerless?
Well, I would definitely ask them to reach out to any of our member programs throughout the state on hscadv.org. Find help. Our website will have a listing of domestic violence programs. And you may not be ready to leave right now, but you can learn about what your options are, and then you can also work with someone on a safety plan.
Yeah, and in a related note, what about someone who may suspect or may think that this is happening to someone that they know or they love, and feeling like you don't necessarily want to get involved or being concerned about your relationship with the victim and how that might impact that? What would you say to those folks?
We recommend that really people are empathetic and recognize and articulate to the people that they're talking to, they're not service providers. They are, they're not the folks who are going to get them all the resources, but you can listen without judgment. You can ask, questions that are helpful to them, and just really be there for someone who really needs to articulate where they're at, but also not try to force them to go get services, because then you're just really replicating the same power and control dynamics of the person who is abusing them.
Okay. Well, Angelina, thank you so much for being here today. We really appreciate you leading us this conversation. We're going to be talking more about resources with our next two guests. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Well, welcome back here to Spotlight Now. As we continue on in our conversations, we're focusing in on the issue of domestic abuse, and we have two guests that are joining us now.
Yeah, we're lucky in our studio to have today Amanda Pump, who is the CEO and President of Child and Family Services, along with Sonoy Kaihue, Executive Director of Women Helping Women. Welcome to you both.
Thank you.
Amanda, I want to start with you and just some of the figures that Angelina laid out in the report that she shared, the scars on the heart. What stood out to you from that data?
I mean, they were staggering, right? I mean, we're seeing such a increase of violence in our communities. It's really sad to actually read the report and kind of see it on paper, even though we pretty much do the work every day. And so what it screams to us is, hey, we got to step up as a community, really start addressing this, and really start, instead of focusing on the intervention, let's start focusing on some prevention. And I think that's a call to action for the entire community.
Yeah, Sonoy, we know that your organization services Maui. Tell us what you're seeing in your community right now.
So similarly throughout the rest of the state, we're seeing a lot of DV that's happening. A lot of it has been sort of exponentially growing because of the wildfires that happened last year. And so, for us, we are trying to do our best. Same like Amanda, guys. We've been trying to be innovative as much as possible with what we got, the resources that we have. But that's what we're seeing. And so our advocates are working really hard, just like everybody else's advocates.
We heard some of the numbers that were presented just a few moments ago by Angelina, and she had mentioned that Maui was number one on the list. Did that surprise you at all, based on what you're seeing? And any conversations that you may have with other state officials? I mean, what was your thought about Maui's numbers specifically?
It really doesn't surprise me whatsoever. We are seeing lots of calls coming into our hotlines. That's a 24-hour hotline, and so, we're seeing calls from not just our state, but we're seeing it even from the mainland or even beyond that. But absolutely not shocking to me to see that was number one.
And Amanda, you did mention prevention. What does that look like?
Well, I think if you say prevention, people think, hey, we have to go into schools, but it could be parents start having conversations with their kids. It could be, hey, if you have a nephew or niece, or start having a conversation and dialogue. What is a healthy relationship? How do we manage stress? What does aloha and love mean? And these are conversations anyone can have in their community with our young children. It doesn't have to have backing of finance or resources behind it. So again, I think domestic violence is an issue that affects and influences every single sector, whether it be first responders, medical, education. It affects and impacts us all. And so if we can all work together to prevent domestic abuse and do it across generations, I think we're going to see a reduction in numbers for years to come.
Well, beyond just, of course, prevention is important, but how do you support the survivors after they remove? Because oftentimes we see in situations where a victim may find themselves going back to a relationship. How do you support the survivors, and what sort of resources are out there for once the decision is made to maybe move on? How can that be bridged to help to provide continued support?
Well, we'll never judge a survivor for going back. And in fact, the likelihood of someone leaving and sustaining independency is about 7 or 8 times they will leave and go back. And it's because, it's very difficult to leave a long-term relationship with little resources. And so I think we have a lot to do to work on to be innovative. And so I want to turn that over to Sonora to see what you think.
Yeah, so, I think a lot of what Amanda said, absolutely 100% accurate. But it really does take a survivor at least 7 times before they leave their abusive partner. That statistic still holds true. And so for us, especially on the neighbor islands, what's going on is that we don't have housing. Mm-hmm. We have lack of an ability to keep up with the cost of living. And so, Oahu is experiencing the same thing, but when you expand out to the outer islands, it gets even exponentially harder.
Yeah, I want to stay with you on that thought for a moment. Walk us through, for anyone who may be watching, who may be a victim themselves, or a survivor themselves, or may know someone who is in this circumstance. Let's say they call your agency or one of those that Amanda helps to service. What is the process? What does that look like? And sort of they can sort of see a path.
Right. So for us, we have an anonymous 24-hour hotline, and that really is kind of the funnel. That's the start for everybody. And so when they reach out and they call us, they can speak to an advocate right away. And then from there, we can kind of help navigate where they go from there and what they're comfortable with, because we're very victim-centered. And so, we're never trying to push anybody to do anything they don't want to do. We just take our cues from them. And yeah, that's what we do on Maui, but and for CFS, you guys do.
Same with us. And, it's not to sugarcoat the road. The road to recovery, to rebuilding life, that's long and hard. But the call to action is, hey, if you're in an unsafe environment, it's worth every step. And so when they call our hotline, we open up the door, not just for island-specific resources, but for statewide resources, and we're there every step of the way. Most islands have a coordinated continuum of care, and so we know what resources are available at the time that the survivor can call. And so we strongly encourage, folks to call, but no, the road's going to be hard, but we're going to be there for them.
Have you seen any significant change in the volume of calls or support that you've had to provide as an organization because of the pandemic? And how have things maybe changed in the organization, or what other trends have you seen in the last few years?
Well, it's the being creative, right? We're serving an 18% increase year over year. That's our numbers at Child and Family Service. We get about 1,800 hotlines calls a year. We serve about 500 survivors across 4 shelters. And if you do the math, so we have about 90 beds because we have 2 shelters on Oahu, 2 on the Big Island, right? And so our beds turn over every 120 days. And so if you're serving about 500 people, you have to be creative because you're serving such a volume of people that you're not meant to serve. So you have to be innovative. You have to braid funds. We have to work collaboratively. So oftentimes if we don't have an open bed and the survivor can travel off island, or if they're at imminent risk and can't stand island, I'll be calling Sonoy. We'll be working together. We'll be streamlining where they can go, where they can have a safe journey and recovery. So I think we have learned to be creative just because you're serving the saturation of the need with funding that has been stagnant, right, for many, many years. So how do you do more with less funding?
Yeah, and Sonoy, I think a similar question to you, not necessarily looking at COVID, but you did mention the wildfires, the stress that has on the entire community, not just those who lived and worked in Lahaina, but just the broader Maui community overall. What has been the impact that you've seen?
So similar to during COVID is we experienced an influx of 24-hour hotline calls. And, that sudden increase really put a high stress on our advocates. I will say, though, that's kind of tying it into COVID. COVID had prepared us for this moment. And so in a weird way, we were actually looking for those extra calls to come in. But, people were searching for loved ones. They were searching for family members, all of those things. But, just like Amanda said, that innovation for us to be able to just keep doing more with less is no longer working. And so we need to really be pushing the envelope with our legislators and all of those things to be able to fund these programs, because without it, advocates will still continue to do their job. However, we need to be paying them the same amount, right? We need to be paying them more, so to say. Yeah.
Amanda, I'm just curious about, from your standpoint, as you talk about funding and just running into just some of those obstacles, and it just seems to me that there have been some pretty, I would say, just visual cases that we've seen in the media that's been reported of various forms of domestic violence. And you hear the stories from the family members who have sought help, who have said this has been going on for some time. And it just appears that in the coverage that we provide and other news stations provide, that there are more and more of these happening. I'm wondering if you feel like this is a moment to speak to lawmakers as a wake-up call, that while these things are while these tragic events are happening, do you feel that there is momentum? Do you feel that there is support for more to be done in this area?
With COVID, with the wildfires, the one thing that we did that I'm super proud of is we worked better together. And so now it's not just my voice, it's Sonoy's and my voice today, and Angelina's, and lawmakers, key officials. So I think we have really shined bright there, but we have a lot of work to do. I mean, we are making, I think, some strides in the right direction, but we really have to sit down and create a plan, because it's not getting better. And the numbers year over year, even though we say, hey, last year and this year there was an increase. Well, there was an increase the year before that, the year before that. So it's not getting better for our communities. And so we have to think, what can we do for domestic violence field or sector? What can we do and educate children at a younger year to stop the generational cycles of abuse? And I think also better understand the social determinants of health and how that influences and impacts survivors in their path to heal.
Yeah, I mean, just building on that, what have you heard from lawmakers, piggybacking on what Ryan is saying, how underfunded is this sector? I mean, how much more money? You don't have to necessarily give a dollar amount, but if it's increasing year over year, I would imagine that the funding is not increasing year over year in the way that you would need.
I think it's a two-pronged. It's state funding and it's federal funding, right? And so we need bottom line, more of both for support. And so what we're trying to do as a nonprofit sector is collect aggregate data together so we can have a true picture of what our sector needs, what the field needs to support the infrastructure of Hawaii. So we're going to get better, I think, in years to come at that. And the last 2 or 3 years of the True Cost Coalition is really when we started to talk about, hey, we need to get together as a nonprofit sector and really come up with the data so we can have a number value, so we can really understand the volume of and the capacity of what the state needs to heal communities and make them thrive, because that's what our job is. Our job shouldn't be continuous healers.
Right.
We should be working with communities to make sure they can continue to thrive.
So now I want to just ask you, and it's a question that I had asked you, Angelina, as well, about any just misconceptions or things that you think that are often just premeditated about what domestic violence is, and maybe what you've seen in your role. It doesn't have to be, of course, a specific case, but just what you've witnessed being on the ground and dealing with people that most people, when they hear about domestic violence, may not associate with.
Well, I think a lot of times what they associate domestic violence with is the physical, right? So they forget about all the other things, the psychological, the emotional, financial, all of those things contribute to just being very, very volatile situations. And in fact, and also another misconception is that the average domestic violence survivor looks like the person that's been beat up or anything like that, right? It doesn't look like the teacher or the principal or your doctor or anybody else, the attorney down the street. Everybody can be a victim of domestic violence. It just depends on what's the situation, right? And so I think just getting rid of that stigma on its own will help people tremendously to understand and have compassion and empathy and all of that. And even for our lawmakers, they need to know that, survivors don't look like what we would consider survivors to look like, right? They just look like me and you and everybody else throughout the day.
One thing that, Amanda, that you had said early on, and Sonoy, I'd love you to respond to this, is that we should be teaching and modeling healthy relationships to children. And so what are some of the early signs? You talked about emotional, financial. It doesn't necessarily have to start physically. Mm-hmm. What are the sort of the steps that lead a relationship there?
Yeah, so it's a lot of the power and control. So that's what we consider that as. It's the model that we've been using for many, many years. And that includes all the pieces that I just talked about. But really, you'll see that there's red flags. There's a lot of isolation. There's a lot of name calling, especially when we talk to teens and young kids, middle schoolers. They'll get into these relationships, or they won't know exactly what a healthy relationship looks like. So they haven't had it modeled in their own homes. And so when they come to school, they think, oh, the boy that hit me down the way, my mom said that he likes me. And when are we going to stop saying that, when kids hit each other, that they like you? That's not something that I subscribe to, and, that young kids should not subscribe to as well.
That's so interesting.
Yeah, Amanda, as we are running out of time here, but I did want to give you an opportunity to maybe speak to those out there who may be looking for support. What is your message out there for an individual who maybe find themselves in a situation where they feel trapped or they feel like they are going through some of the things that you're describing? Can you tell us a little bit about some of the services and help that's available?
Sure. Well, I want to start by help is available to any person that just wants to call and talk to us. You don't have to commit to a service. You don't have to commit to, hey, I want to come into a shelter. All you have to do is pick up the phone and call. If you ever need support or just someone to talk to, we can be a sounding board. We have great partnerships with our community. You don't have to give your name. You can keep everything confidential. But if you ever feel like I'm alone in this, or I'm not sure that this is the right relationship, or I don't know if my environment's the safest, pick up the phone and give us a call on our hotline. We'd love to talk to you.
Yeah, Sonoy, same question for you.
Yeah, it's the same thing. I mean, that ability to remain anonymous on a phone call really gives an opportunity for people to just reach out. And so that is the first thing, is just reach out, talk to somebody. No judgments on the phone, and we just want to hear from you and help you.
It's so good to know that these resources are out there. Thank you both for being here today. We so appreciate it.
Thanks for having us.
Okay, we'll be right back. Stay with us.
What is Hawaii's soul?
It's the way we exist with all living things. The aina, the ocean, the sky, the kanaka, who originated from the islands.
And everyone who calls Hawaii home.
It's all of us living with island consciousness.
It's understanding that the past is in front of us so that everyone can follow the kupuna
that came before us.
It's our shared kuleana to take care of these islands.
And each other, because we belong to Hawaii.
We are Ko Hawaii.
Spotlight Now with Yunji Denise and Ryan Kalei Suji. Connecting you with newsmakers from throughout our islands. Going in depth with Hawaii's leaders and taking your questions live. Spotlight Now, where Hawaii comes to talk.
Welcome back here to Spotlight Now. We had a very interesting conversation, of course, two very different topics, but we started off our conversation speaking and catching up with the Kauai County Mayor Derek Kawakami, who talked about some of the hard decisions that he's had to make. Of course, the negotiation process that had to go on with the COVID hazard pay and that settlement that was ultimately reached at 15% for Kauai workers.
Yeah, interesting also to get his perspective on what's happened with destination management in Ha'ena. And he's saying basically that he also supports the green fee, that he says that Hawaii is not asking enough of what we're actually worth, not charging what we're worth. And, when he gave those examples of going to the continent, we do pay for everything when we go there. So there is an argument to be made that more needs to be paid here. We expect to hear a lot more of that in the legislative session ahead. And then interesting to hear from him about what he's thinking about his political future.
Yeah, you can hear the mayor that he definitely sees public service in his future. We did not get a commitment on an exact race or role that he'd like to run for or pursue, but did note that he does still want to continue on. Of course, he has 2 more years left in his term, but the mayor saying that he could potentially be looking and eyeing a seat in the Hawaii Senate should Senate President Ron Kochi decide not to run for office. But there aren't a lot of seats available. Again, he is someone who came and served in the Hawaii State House for some time before going back to living on the island as mayor. And so the thought would be for him to move into the Senate seat, but who knows?
Yeah, Senator Kochi has been there for some time, and of course he is Senate president. So, but he did say that they have been having those talks behind the scenes. We do know that he held a pretty high-profile fundraiser at the Pacific Club that was widely covered, and so there are a lot of titterings as to where that could go. He has not ruled out a race for governor either, so it's just a wait and see. He surfs 4 times a week.
He does,
That is kind of a lot. So impressive. And who knows that he's binge watching horror movies. I did not expect
Yeah,
that.
and we're going to have to wait to see what he is for Halloween. And then we completely switch gears, of course, talking about domestic violence and some of the services that are available. There was also a recent report that was released that really identified some of the key areas and some of the communities that are really ranked within the state, and Maui leading the way with the most cases of domestic violence.
Yeah, the difficult statistics to hear. We encourage you actually to go online and Google that Scars on the Heart report. It's full of really interesting data about demographics, where they're seeing the most domestic violence, and what are some of the key indicators. Also, if you or someone you know is in this circumstance, we encourage you to reach out to the providers that were on our program today, including Child and Family Services. They have a myriad of different systems that they work with, and that is anonymous. You don't have to commit to anything. Resources are out there for you.
That's right. Next week, we will be getting our Kamehameha students involved in our show. We're going to be hearing from them as they decide on the topics. They're going to be focusing in on out-migration of Hawaii as well as local ias. So make sure you tune in next week, Tuesday, for a very special student edition of Spotlight Now.
Aloha.